decided to show his wife how very much he loved her. So before going home, he showered, shaved, put on some nice choice cologne, and bought her a bouquet of flowers. He went to the front door and knocked. His wife opened the door and exclaimed, "Oh no, this has been a terrible day," she said. "First I had to take Billy to the emergency room and get stitches in his leg. Then your mother called and said she's coming for 2 weeks. Then the washing machine broke, and now this, you come home drunk." You know, there are times when husbands just can't seem to do anything right. Well, today's gospel lesson is about another husband. And although certainly one of the most recognizable figures in the Bible, and surely of the Christmas story, Joseph, nevertheless, is mentioned only briefly in the scriptures. He's almost a forgotten figure. The Catholic Church, of course, has recognized him through sainthood, but once again, there's not a single word of dialogue in the scriptures attributed to Joseph. He's without doubt the truly forgotten figure of Christmas. The gospel lesson for today describes the part that Joseph played in the Christmas miracle. To begin with, we're told that Mary was a spouse to Joseph, that is, she was pledged to him. And as part of the arranged marriage, which was the custom of the times, they never were intimate. So before the marriage is consummated, Mary was found to be with child. Obviously, that presents a rather awkward situation, to say the least. One might think that Joseph would have been terribly upset. But the scriptures tell us that Joseph, being a just man, was willing to do something about that. Apparently it was his intention to simply hide Mary away, to spare her all of this embarrassment. But at this point, of course, God sends an angel to intervene, explaining that the virgin birth is indeed a fulfillment of the prophecies, and this child of Mary is the blessed one that shall save his people from their sins. And so Joseph did as the angel instructed him. We're told that he knew her not until she had brought forth her newborn son. You know, it's perfectly clear that Joseph had to be a right special sort of fellow. He was more than just an ordinary man. He was, first of all, I think, a man of great character. And he possessed some pretty good character traits. For example, Joseph appeared to be a man of great humility. He recognized his place in this Christmas miracle. He knew that his role was a supportive one to Mary and Jesus. He didn't reach beyond himself for personal greatness. He was quite content to do what God asked of him. And then secondly, he recognized that his chastity had an apostolic purpose. He knew that his role was to be one of purity. Now, sometimes we think this word of chastity has something having to do with abstaining from sex. But it also has another meaning, a meaning of purity, of being pure. And that Joseph understood his role was one of purity, one of modesty, and one of decency. And Joseph was also a very obedient man. He was obedient in every aspect of his life. He was obedient entering into his marriage with the Blessed Virgin Mary. He was obedient in his willingness to protect her. He was obedient in coming to Bethlehem to take care of his civic responsibilities. He was obedient in gathering up his wife when the angel came and instructed him to flee and go to Egypt. Throughout this entire scenario surrounding the birth of Jesus, Joseph was mindful and obedient to what had to be done. Then I think Joseph was a very prudent man. Perhaps one of the reasons that there's no known record of any dialogue from Joseph is that his prudence dictated that he be very wary of too much public conversation. Now you can imagine that perhaps someone with such greatness surrounding him might be bold enough to say, that's my boy, the chosen one. Nothing like my boy here is going to do great miracles when he grows up. Joseph, you see, was a very prudent man. Finally, I think Joseph was a man who had great love for his family. He acted out for his love by being a constant part of their lives. He was their guardian, their protector, and provider, and he loved them through his attention and care. So what can we learn from the life of Joseph? First of all, we can learn a great deal about humility. Humility is that thing that prevents us from claiming to be better or more than we really are. It protects us from being prideful, which if you remember from your confirmation classes is one of the 7 deadly sins. And then all of us can learn something about prudence. It's a word we don't hear much about anymore. It teaches us about self-control. When to be silent when we're tempted to speak out wrongfully or unnecessarily. Prudence is that great intellectual value that instructs us in the difference between what is good and what is bad. Of course, obedience to God's will is certainly a very important aspect of our being Christians. And that is a trait of Joseph that all of us should be concerned about. How often do we stop and really consider if our lives are really dedicated to putting God's will at the forefront of our own lives? The last 2 attributes of Joseph I think we ought to consider are somewhat cojoined: chastity and love. Chastity is that attribute which causes us to refrain from acts and thoughts that are not in accordance with God's teachings. Unfortunately, it is an attribute so often neglected or overlooked in today's society. One, unfortunately, that is so often responsible for broken homes and neglected children. Finally, Joseph's love for his family should serve as an example to every father and husband in the world. His entire devotion to his role as a father and a husband was in direct response to God's expectations. And that's what God expects of husbands and fathers: to love, to care, to look after, to protect, to provide for their families. When the Blessed Virgin Mary replied in the Magnificat, "Be it done to me according to your will," and when her son expressed, "If you love me, keep my commandments," Joseph was in his own quiet, non-assuming role there, not only as the loving, caring, and supportive husband and father, but as God's obedient servant as well. Joseph lived an exemplary life, a life that any man or woman, for that matter, could be proud of. Often we forget the role that he played in our Savior's life. It was a good role, and it was the role that God expected him to follow. Pray with me for just a moment, please. Lord, when we observe the life of Joseph, let us attempt to put into our own lives the same kind of compassion and love, discipline, restraint, and plain obedience to your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Remember the words of our Lord, how